Okay, cool. So we're getting started today. Our objective for today is to add favoriting to our application. We want to allow the user to favorite an item that they're looking at, and that favorited item will go over to the profile view controller, which will also update. And the profile view controller will have a segmented control with a favorites button and a my items button. My items represents all the items I've posted. Will show in the table view, and favorites, whatever I favorited, will show in that table view. So this is the objective of the morning. Let's get started with our application. Let's go ahead and run our app from where it was yesterday. So yesterday, what did we add? We added this UI here, which is a detail view, which allows us to add comments on a specific item. We were able to click into our comments box and add some sort of comment and click the send button, and that adds a comment. We could remove that alert. We don't need it. We just added it, but that alert, we really don't need it here. And then it adds a comment here. And we were able to sort it by date, right? So as we see today, it's 10/24, and yesterday we had all those comments here. So it's sorted by most recent date. We're able to do that as well. Also yesterday, we were able to add our image as a header view, right? So this is a header view in the table view. Again, the most important part of setting up the header view was to have the height, right? We agreed that, and we also went to the documentation to see that the width is done by the table view itself, but what the table view needs is the height, right? So we specified a height back in our header view here. We created a header view. We created a header view class. Let me open that up a little bit more here. We created a header view class, and the header view class took in an initializer, a string, and that string went ahead and updated the image view for that particular header view. And again, the most important part here was giving a height, right? That width is not exactly used. The width is just used by the width is automatically set by the table view, okay? Awesome. So let's get started with our UI for favoriting. The first thing we'll go after is favoriting an item. So we'll start off by going to storyboard for the main view. We'll go over to storyboard, and we'll go over to our item detail controller. We're now in the item detail controller. We'll add in a UI bar button item. So we'll search for UI bar button item. We'll drag a bar button item over here. And we'll change the image name of it to say heart. Okay, so we have a heart. We click on the heart, and we'll change the heart tint color to say system red. So here we have our heart UI bar button item. We'll open up the assistant editor. We'll open up our assistant editor and make sure that we're editing the item detail controller. Okay, so on the item detail controller, we need to have an action so that when we press on that heart, some action happens. So we will navigate down. We'll navigate down right above our extension, right below the dismiss keyboard action, and we'll drag in an action from our heart icon here. So control drag over, and we'll just say favorite button pressed. Okay, cool. So when that favorite button is pressed, we want to go ahead and favorite that item, right? We'll also have to check later, like, is that item favorited already, right? That way we could toggle the item. But for now, we'll just go ahead and favorite the item by adding it to Firebase. So we're done with the storyboard. We could close it out and only focus on our items detail controller. Okay. We have Firestore. This is good. Do we have access to database? This is good. We have that. So let's now navigate back to favorite button pressed. Favorite button pressed. What do we want to do? We want to add a favorite to our users collection. So in our users collection, under that user document, we'll add a sub collection called favorites. Everybody with me so far? Okay. Let's navigate to our database service class. So let's navigate to our database service class and let's add in a new function. Let's add in a new function right below post comment. Post comment we wrote yesterday. Right below post comment, let's add in a new function here. We could call it add to favorites. Okay, so add to favorites, it expects an item, and we'll have a completion. We'll have a result type, capturing either we were successful or we had an error. We will need a user because we need to capture the user ID in order to store it into our favorite document here. So user we will get from auth.auth.current user. Okay, next we'll access our collection. In that case, we're accessing the users collection. So database service dot users collection. Database service dot users collection. In that users collection, we need a favorites collection. Let's take a pause here. And then we'll create a static type favorites collection. So let's now navigate to the top. Let's navigate to the top of our file and let's create a favorites collection here called favorites. And this is also a sub collection on a user document. Cool. So going back down, let's continue on. So here we have collection. We need to get to document. In that case, the document is the current user's ID. This is why we needed that user here. So now we'll be able to access the user document with the user ID. Then we go to collection. Remember, Firebase is collection document, and so on. So here we need to now pass in the collection that we're interested in. Is going to be database.favorites collection. And in favorites collection, we'll basically now create the document. The document will use the item ID as the document ID. And now we'll just go ahead and set data. So item ID, item.item ID, sorry. Dot set data, and set data with completion. Set data with completion handler. And here we'll pass in our dictionary objects, whatever we're interested in saving. Great, so again to review, DB here is the top level of our database. We're accessing the users collection. In that users collection, we're accessing that current users document. In the user document, we now want to go ahead and create a favorites collection. If the favorites collection already exists, we only write to it. If it doesn't exist, it gets created. When it gets created, we create a new document, and we'll be using the item, the same item that the user is trying to favorite. We'll use that item as the item ID as that document ID. Okay, now we need to go ahead and start saving some properties here. We'll start off by having the item name. Item name will be from the item.item name. Next, we'll save the price. Price is item.price. Next, we'll save image URL. Image URL is item.image URL. Favorited date. Favorited date. This will be a timestamp with our current date. We will grab the item ID, item.id, item ID, and lastly, we will grab the seller ID. Actually, seller display name and seller ID. So seller, one second, let me double check what we call this. Seller, item. Is it seller name or just seller? Seller name. Okay, so here we have seller name. Thank you. Item.seller name. And lastly, seller ID. Seller ID is item.seller ID. Build, make sure we have no errors. So this is what we're saving as the favorite item here. We have the favorited date. The item we favorited, we have the name of it. So we could recreate an item when we get it back from Firebase. Okay, to continue on, we'll go here, we'll say if let error.
Are you in database?
I'm in database services, yeah. That's the first set of code we wrote. And then only, we also added a favorites collection at the very top.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's called favorites. Not in the model, at the very top, in the static area there. Yeah. So, cool. So we check to see if we have an error. If not, we'll just simply do completion here. And we will say failure. Well, not failure. This is success here. Return true. And in our error block, completion and failure. Error. So this is what add to favorites look like. Okay. Hello. While we're here, we'll write remove from favorite, and we'll also write is this item in my favorites, okay? Before we go over to the view controller, we'll just take care of all those functions here. So add to favorites, we add into favorites. We want to also be able to remove from favorites. And we also want to check, like, hey, before I add something, is this in my favorites? Everybody with me? Okay? So we'll go ahead and write those functions, and then we'll continue. Okay, so next function. Public function remove from favorites. Remove from favorites takes an item, also completion. Result type here. I'm sorry? Delete what? Delete comment. No, we didn't do delete comment. We've done that already in the create item. So we could implement it if we do need it. But I just want to show us all the APIs.
Have you done anything with UI?
No.
We have the button.
The button? Oh, yes. Feels like yesterday already. We added a favorite button in the detail view. So remove from favorite. Let's go ahead. Same thing here. Let's.
The tab bar, the navigation bar?
Yeah. So here we have a current user, else return. We want to remove an item from favorites. So let's go ahead and access the collection we want to remove from. Here we'll say database service dot users collection dot, where am I? Document, what's the document? The user ID. User dot user ID. Again, we all understand what's happening on that particular line of code here, right? I'm trying to access the document I want to delete. To access it, I have to access first the top collection, then go to that document, then go to the collection, then go to whatever I want to delete. So document ID, this is great. Now we want to go to collection. This is a sub-collection here. So database service dot favorites collection. And in the favorites collection, what do I want to delete here? Right, so I access the document. Now we need an ID. What is that document I want to delete? It happens to be item.item ID. Because remember, we saved the document up here. We saved the document using the item ID. Do we see that here? So I'm able to access it again via the item ID and then just delete it. Okay? So here I simply say delete. And it has an error in my completion. And now I simply check if there was an error while deleting. Else simply just return true. And if there was an error, we return that error or capture that error in our failure block here. So we've done add, now we did remove.
So,
Yes?
if we were to not use the delete function with completion, it would just not return, we would just not know what would be happening, right?
Yeah. It would be like a silent error.
Okay.
This is the first time that we use the favorites database favorites collection.
Yeah,
This is the first time we made it.
yeah. So that's like, yeah.
Yeah.
So at the end, we have 2 outer collections and 2 sub collections. Yes, sir.
I have a question about deleting sub-collections. collection and it has sub-collections, the sub-collection data is not deleted.
No, because the document is still there.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So how would you delete, let's say you wanted to get rid of your users for whatever reason, how would you delete all the
If you want to get rid of the users collection, you mean?
for whatever reason, how would you delete all the way through?
Like you want to basically delete the entire collection. The best way would just be to go on the console and delete it.
But if you delete the item, would it not, like the main item, would it not delete the collections that's within it?
If you delete, say,
Like if we
the comments are going to be gone from the app. Like that's going to be gone.
does it stay in the database?
Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah. But if I want to delete like an outside collection, I wouldn't do it from the app. I would just go to the console and delete it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. All right. So we have our add to favorites, correct? Do we all have our add to favorites? And now we have our remove from favorites, correct?
Oh, wait, I don't have that. Oh, wait, I don't.
Our last function, it will be just, okay. Our last function is going to be is an item in favorites. So is item in favorites. Is item in favorites or not? So we have an item here as our parameter. At this point, we will be very comfortable with completion handlers, yes? It's all over the place here. And we know with an asynchronous call, that's why we have @escape in here. And we have our result type. We have a Boolean value, error. Was there a question? Same logic, guard, let, user. Here we're just making sure we have a user because we need that user object later. So user of dot auth dot current user. Okay. Actually, we're going to see a little querying today. That's good. All right, so now db.collection. What collection we're interested in? We're interested in our users collection, database service.users collection. In that users collection, I'm looking at my user ID. The document for the user is,
Under remove from favorite?
yeah. Yeah, that's a new function under remove from favorites. So we have add to favorites. We also want to be able to remove from favorites. And we also want to check to see, hey, is this a favorite, right?
Is it kind of like how we have the database, the,
Persistence.
yeah.
Yeah, data persistence, yeah. So we have our users collection. We have the document, which is that users document here. And now we want to go to the collection. What collection are we interested in there? What sub-collection? Favorites, very good. So we'll say database service.favorites collection. And at this point, we stop in here, and we want to make a query, right? Because right now, I don't know what document I'm looking for. So I will make a query here. I'll say where, let's stop here for a second. In Firebase, we use the where keyword to query a collection to query a collection. When I say query, I'm talking about searching, right? So query is the same as search. So here we're getting introduced to the where keyword. So I say dot where, and we see we have a lot of options here, right? We have a lot of options for querying. We could say where field, string, in any. There's a lot of options here. The one we're interested in is where the field, whatever string it is, whatever keyword, again, In Firebase, it's a dictionary, so I have a key value. That's why it says string here. So here you need to pass in a key. What key are you interested in? Okay? So we use where field is equal to. For the field, we'll put in whatever key we're looking for. In our case, our key, I want to make sure the key is correct, is item ID. Item ID. Be careful there, make sure that the item ID is the same that you sent to Firebase. This is how we sent it up. It was camel case, uppercase I, lowercase d for item ID. Okay, make sure that's what you have. Is equal to, here you pass in whatever you're querying for. So we have an item ID. Right? It's a query. We want to get all the documents. You could query for a snapshot listener. Again, the difference between a listener, it always listens for updates. Okay? If I only want to get documents one time, I say get documents. If I want to always listen, I add a snapshot listener on that query. Everybody with me? Okay? So
Do we have a favorite date and a favorite by on our model?
we don't have a favorite model yet.
Alright, so we have, okay.
Yeah, we're just sending data to Firebase right now. We haven't retrieved it.
So just create it.
So here we're gonna do where, actually I did where already. So either I say add a listener or I say get documents. Do we all understand the differences between the two of them now? Okay, so get documents gets the documents one time. Okay? Add listener, at that point, I attach a listener to that query. So anytime there's a change on my database, I'll get an update about it. Okay? Okay. Any other questions about it? Because I don't want to continue unless we understand that there.
And would you have a listener to a specific collection?
Yes, which is what we did for our first view controller. Yeah, which we can change. I'm thinking of changing it every time, and then just have like a refresh control.
And what would be the difference between the two? In case like, when is one better to use?
It depends on the UI you're going for, and it also depends on where, like if you're segueing a lot back and forth, right, you might want to not have a listener there, because that's gonna have some glitches with your UI, right? Where you just rather maybe have a refresh control and update it manually as you need, which most apps do have a refresh control, and the user is understanding at that point, like, hey, if I want to get new Instagram posts, I need to pull to refresh. Cool? Very good. Okay, so get documents here, get documents with.
Can I just be sure that I understand? So we said that when we're doing a listener, that's listening for all the changes in the database, right?
Yeah, so we said add snapshot. Is it lower uppercase? And we have get documents, right?
So the snapshot is for everything, and the document is just one.
Snapshot continues to add snapshot listener. Continues to listen for changes or modifications to a collection, whereas get documents fetches a collection or fetches documents only once. Right?
So listener is like updates it?
Yeah, like automatic
And
updating.
documents, it's just like shows you the document at that point?
Yes, that's it. If you want more, you have to query again. Cool? Are we all updated here with that?
Is it kind of like similar to if we were to simplify it? Like, let's say you have a table view and a detail view controller. The table view is like a snapshot, right?
Mhm.
Whereas the detail view controller would be like the get document where you focus on one.
I would not use that. I would use an analogy where notification center
Okay.
is always listening for keyboard changes. Right? When the keyboard goes up, right, my keyboard notification function gets called because I set an observer.
And that would be the get document.
That would be the add snapshot listener. It's always listening for changes on the keyboard.
Okay, so then what would be the get document function?
Hmm?
And that.
Get documents is very static. Get documents is like you fetch from an API. You fetch from an API one time. If you want to get more, you have to fetch again. Okay? Like your Foursquare app, you fetch for a venue, it's not going to automatically update anymore. Correct? If I want to get more venues, I have to make that query again. Okay? Right? It's not, it's, yeah. Does that make sense there? Any other questions about that? Right? Any other questions? Cool.
But if you did put it in like the, not a snippet, but like, I think it's like a little weird, but I bet you every time you come back to the.
Well, that's fetching manually anyway. Every time I come back to view it appear. Cool? Very good. All right, let's continue on. So we have our query here. We have our snapshot here. Let's go ahead and if let error and error. And now if else if snapshot equal to snapshot. We have a completion already, right? Yes. Okay. So here we have an error. So we simply return error. Else here, completion. Actually, let's do some more work here. Okay. So we have a snapshot. We have documents. We could do something here. We could say, why don't we get the count? Snapshot dot documents dot count. We could do something like if count is greater than 0, else that. So here we could say completion success. If it's greater than 0, that means we are good. It does exist. If it's not, we'll say false. Does that make sense here? So we check the count of documents. Remember the snapshot, that document? Do we have results from that query? Right? So here, the count, check if we have documents. If we have documents, if we're greater than 0, that means we have documents. That means it does exist, right? Because at the end of the day, what's our function? Is item in favorites, right? So if the item is in favorites, we capture true here. If not, then we capture false. Any questions about what we just wrote here? Any other questions about it? Any other questions? What's that, Luba? Luba, what's the question?
This isn't a listener.
No, not a listener. One time.
Yeah.
It's always a snapshot, regardless of listener or not. Snapshot is this Firebase data type. Okay. The difference is get documents versus Luba up here. Get documents, but look up. Get documents versus add snapshot. Okay? But both of them still return us a snapshot. Okay? You had a question?
The navigation app, like a real-time navigation app, be an example of a snapshot listener?
Yes, exactly. So Jahid was saying, like a navigation app, for example, is that a good example of a snapshot listener? Yes, because it's always listening for changes. Like in call location, I'm not saying only give me location one time. I'm saying continue to give me the user's location as they're moving. Very good.
So we're checking if we have documents in favorites.
Yes. So if we favorite an item like a Chanel bag, for example, we don't want to keep favoriting that same item. We want to check to see, does it exist already?
So what is the difference here between the error and
Well, we're just checking for the count. Error is error. We failed to do something,
Okay.
right? But here we have a success case where we're actually using the Boolean value as it's needed here. So if the count is not greater than 0, that means there's nothing there.
All right, so returning false is the same as just, well, putting a completion of false is just the same as returning, like doing a return?
We'll, in our view controller, we'll see if it's true or false.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Mhm. Okay, so now let's navigate back to, where are
So
we
basically, we're
here?
expecting a response, and the response is supposed to do something somewhere else.
We
Is that what we're
expect
gonna
a
use to see whether it's fake? Never mind, I got it.
Sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think I understand why we're retrieving the count. Because if I'm understanding what we're reading right,
Well, it's the snapshot could exist and there's nothing in there.
but aren't we just seeing if the snapshot exists though?
That's not enough.
That's not enough.
No. I want to see if there's documents in there.
But you can have empty.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so moving back to, where are we? What navigation, what view controller are we on? We're in the detail controller and we favorited. So we haven't favorited an item at all yet. So favorite button pressed, let's first just go ahead and favorite it. Database service dot add to favorites. Add to favorites, we have an item. In the item detail controller, the favorite button pressed. Are we all in there? Are we all in favorite button pressed?
No, I need to.
Yes?
So we added a new view controller, and we connected it to the, so,
The detail view controller add a favorite button.
right, and what does that connect to?
Let's switch on our result. Switch on our result. We favorite in here. Case success, well, failure first. Let error. Else success. Let. Here we don't need the Boolean value. Break. And let's break our return cycles here. And let's go to our dispatch. So dispatch here. Main, async, and we'll throw up an error, show alert.
We have it under the false comment?
Yeah, error dot localized description and next success. We could put an error, not an error, sorry, an alert here. Item favorited. And just pass a nil, build, make sure we have no errors. Okay, cool. So we'll favorite, we'll verify we favorited, and then we'll take a short break and we'll come back. And we'll help anybody who is not up to this point yet, and we'll continue after. So we have our favorite button pressed, that's wired up to our heart icon in our tab, in our nav controller. When we click on it, it calls this and it adds to favorite. Actually, let's keep going here because we have the function already. Okay, we have the function already, so let's just go ahead and use it. So database service, are we okay here? Did we write this function? This block of code?
No.
No? Okay, so I'll hold off on that. I'll hold off on that. Okay, let's test it out. Let's run it. Let's run it. Let's click on an item. Click on an item and click on the heart symbol here. Either we have an error. In that case, we have item favorited. So I click OK. I navigate to my console. I go to my users collection, and I'm seeing the favorites already. So in my users collection, the top collection, I go to the document, in that case, the current user. I go to, now we have a new sub-collection, which is called favorites. I click on the sub-collection, and the item I just favorited here, it's that document here, Shin Godzilla, shows the time that it was favorited, and the image URL, and all that stuff there. Were we all able to favorite an item? Awesome. So we'll take a break here, and then we'll come back, we'll continue. So continuing on, we have our UI, we have our favorite button already. So let's go ahead and continue to build out that UI. Back in our item detail controller, let's go ahead and write a private function, a private var here, call it isFavorite. IsFavorite is a Boolean value. Well, we'll just assign it to false. We don't need to do all that. IsFavorite is a Boolean value. We set it to false by default. We'll have a did set on it, so when it changes, we could change what the heart looks like. If isFavorite, where's Madame? When she comes back, she'll be asking all the questions. So if isFavorite here, we'll say navigation item dot write bobbin item dot image equal to, again, we could say write bobbin item here because we know our item is in the right side. Everybody with me? We could have also added an outlet to our UI bobbin item. But here we only know we have one item, so we could say write bobbin item. So we get access to the write bobbin item, and we could change the image on it. In our case, if it's a favorite, what do we want to do? What do we want to do here? If it's a favorite, what's the image? Heart.fill, very good. So here we'll say heart.fill. And if it's not a favorite, we'll simply just say heart. For folks coming back, we just wrote a computed property, well, not computed property, but a new property called isFavorite, and we have a property observer on it. So every time it gets set, we change what the image is in the nav bar, right? So either it's a filled heart, meaning I've favorited that item, or it's an unfilled heart, meaning it's not favorited yet.
And this is an item detail.
Yeah. Who's able to be here tomorrow? Okay, cool. Excellent.
You gotta be here all day.
One more day, and you get to work remote for a week. It's not all what you think it.
That's fine, that's
It's
fine.
not all what you think it is, man.
I'm not even worried about that,
That's
but
not
yesterday I had to wait for like 5 minutes to go out before I could get on.
But you got an empty train.
But I had to wait like 45 minutes.
But you were reading Swift while waiting.
I was worried about
You were catching up on Firebase documentation. Awesome. Very good. So we have our is favorite. All that is good. Can we scroll down? Oh, you got the wrong thing? I'll take it.
No.
That lock is gonna break. Can we scroll? Cool. So let's scroll and add an update UI. View did appear, all that is good there, all that's good. Right below our lifestyle, our life cycle methods, we'll write private function call update UI. What does update UI do? Did we have, let me just double check our app here real quickly. Yeah, we have, okay, so we did that already, that's fine. Okay, that's good. So we have our item name, that's fine already. Okay, so now let's go ahead and check if item is a favorite. And update heart icon accordingly.
Yes, I wish you would be.
Okay, so database service dot is item favorite. We pass in item completion. Cool. And here we switch on our result. Case failure, let error. Week self here, break any retain cycles, and dispatch here to show our alert. Self, show alert. What does our alert look like? Update UI, is item in favorite? I'll just say try again here. Build. Next, we'll go over to our success case. Here, we'll use that Boolean value. Let it. Oh yeah, sorry. Thank you, sir. And the warning is there too. Awesome. So I don't want to say is favorite again. I'll just say success. So if success, else. So what does it say? If success here, Luba, what does it say?
If success is favorite,
Is what?
like change.
If success means if it's true, correct?
It's true.
Okay, because here we're not saying if success equal to true like that, right? We're not doing that. Right, everybody? We good here? Yes? All right. So if success meaning true, we'll come in here and we'll say is favorite. So self is favorite. Assign that to true. Self here is favorite. Assign it to false. If we have an error, we're not going to do anything here, just show an alert. And we'll call our update UI in our viewed load. Cool? Good? Good? Can we scroll to viewed load?
So instead of doing this with true, we could do just like true form. Instead of making left just that. Could we do the way we did it before?
You mean like if, I cannot say just if true, like what's
Set is
true?
a bool.
Yes. But what's the question? What's the
But I
question?
think we never did it this way.
Well, that's a case we need to do there because we need to see if it was true or false. Other places we just said the thing was successful.
I just did it and then somewhere else.
So back in our viewed load, let's now go to viewed load. Ooh, we got to clean that up a little bit. You guys could clean that up, right, after the fact. The less code you have in there, the better. Just to remind us there. Everybody, yes? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I could have like that refactored to like configure table view. I could have this code in my update UI, right? Just let's be mindful of that. I'll actually just put a to-do here. If you guys see clean up, that means I just cleaned it up. But refactor some of refactor code in viewed load. We should always strive for less code in our viewed load. So we could refactor it into like small functions here, refactor code, helper functions. Cool, so now let's just call our update UI. Like we have an update UI function, we're not gonna put that whole block into our viewed load. Everybody with me? Right? So it's better to have like 2-3 functions here that you call in here as opposed to like all that code here. Update UI is being called, great, let's go ahead and test it. I favorited an item, so if I run this, it should be a heart, a filled heart here. It's not, actually it is, just took a little while from the database, right? Everybody with me? Let's go ahead and create a new item, actually, so that we see the differences here. I'll say electronics. I will get access to some electronic I have here. It's a MacBook. And it is $2,500. And if I click on the MacBook, it's not a filled heart, right? But if I go to my Shin Godzilla, this is a filled heart. Everybody with me? Does it work for us all? Update UI. So let's go back to update UI here. And while we're in update UI, we have a refactoring to do. Let's just grab all our database wait, No, that's fine. Sorry, wrong function. Back in our add to favorites or the favorite button pressed, we have a refactoring to do there. Update UI is good to go. Any other questions, Mini, there, particular update UI?
Yeah. So the next thing would be for us to check if it's favorites.
Yes, we're gonna go back in, exactly. So now we're gonna go to favorite button pressed and write that code here. So this is what I'm talking about. We refactored this particular guy. So favorite button pressed, are we all in our favorite button pressed? Okay, so let's go ahead and cut or copy, whatever, the database add to favorites function call. And in here, we'll simply say if is favorite, do X, else do Y. So if it is favorite, we don't want to add it again. But if it's not in favorite, we want to add it. Right? So if it's favorite, if it is favorited already, remove from favorites. If it's not favorited, then add to favorites. So basically, we're going to be toggling between favorites and not favorited.
Did you take something out of the function?
Did I take something out of the function?
Oh, you just copied it because you're gonna basically put the same thing up top.
Exactly. But now we check in first before we do an action. If we add to favorites, one more thing we want to do here. Everybody refactored and checked first here, everybody? In our success block, we added something to favorite. We want to update our favorite variable. So is favorite is now true. So please update this right below our show alert item favorited. Add in self is favorite is true. The minute we say is favorite is true, what happens? Cassandra? Right, so the icon changes. The minute I say I change my is favorite variable, our icon will change. Okay? Next, let's go ahead and, can we scroll up a little bit? Next, we'll go ahead and call our remove favorites function. So database dot remove from favorites the item result I'll copy my dispatch. Cool. So we're in our block here. Let's switch on result. Case failure, let error. Fail to remove favorite. And we have case success. Item removed. Luba, I think that was your question earlier. So here, 1 second, week, var, week, self. That was your question earlier about the success. We're not using it here because either we have a failure or we're done, right, Luba? But in that add to favorites, or not add to favorites, in the is item is in favorites, we actually check in the Boolean value, okay? Because if the count is 0, it's not there. Cool? I think that should be it for that view controller. I mean, there's always things we could add, but yep. That's that's what the user expects, right? Like if I click on something once to like it, I click on it again, it should unlike it, correct? We put in alerts here, but really and truly, we don't need the alerts here on the success, right? Like you're not gonna show the user like, hey, I don't like something. But for now, that's fine. Let's go ahead and run it. So on Shin Godzilla, again, it's part of my, it's a favorite of mine. If I click on it, item removed. Did we not remove? Oh, we haven't set that to false. Here, let's set that to false. Self, please do that. Set is favorite to false here. Make sure you say is favorite set to false because we were able to remove it, but we did not update our UI. Right below, in our success block on line 201. In our remove from favorites block there. So after we add that one line, let's run it again. After we added that one line, let's run it again. It's not my favorite, that's why it's an empty heart, right? If I click on it to re-add it, item favorited, great. Let's verify here before I go back and forth. So if I refresh my console, come on. Refresh console, and I have a favorite here, right? If I go back to the app, I remove it from favorites, I get an item removed, and it's also updated the UI. If I go back here, I have no favorite, right? Awesome. So we're able to favorite items, and we're also able to update our UI on our app. Any questions before we continue? Was everybody able to get their favorites favorited and unfavorited? Okay, cool.
It's like mine, it'll favorite it on the view.
Mm-hmm.
When I go off and come back, it's no longer favorite.
It favorites it on the detail view.
If I press it, it'll show the pop up.
Like here, like if I favorite it, right? And I go out, and I go back in,
It's no longer favorite.
make sure in your view did load, you call in update UI. Because update UI checks to see if the thing was in your favorite. So what are we doing here in our view did load? In our view did load, we call in update UI. Update UI checks if this item is in your favorite. If it is, success. You need to make sure to set that to true. Else, false. You have that? And also in the did set here, you have a did set in your is favorite. Here. And make sure that you're changing it to the correct icons. And then put breakpoints there and verify what's happening. Cool. Awesome. We good to continue straight out? We good to continue? All right. So let us go now to, let's see what the UI looks like before we go here. So the next part of our lecture today, since we're able to favorite items, we want to see where those items are, right? So we will create a UI for our items. Well, right now we have my items and we have favorites. We have both. So now we want to create a UI to show it, okay? So we'll update our profile view controller to look somewhat like what we have here. Cassandra did not draw it. But if she did, it would be better than what I have here. So profile view controller, basically the same element. Okay, so we'll redo some constraints here. We'll add in a segmented control, which we do not have yet. And we'll add in a table view, which we do not have yet either. Okay? Again, to reiterate, this could have been a header view, like this particular. This here could have easily been a header view. Right? This here could have easily been a header view that we have somewhere, and then we just inject it in the table view. But that's fine. We'll just use our scene as we have it, and we'll move some constraints around, have a segmented control, have an action for the segmented control, and have our table view. So this is where we headed. Okay, cool. So let us navigate to our app. And work on that UI. So let's go to our storyboard and we go into our profile view scene. Profile view right here. We're going back to our profile view scene here. And click on our update profile. Click on our update profile button and reset or remove, sorry, not reset. Clear the constraints. So click on the update profile button and click on clear constraints. Do the same for the sign out. Click on sign out and clear constraints. And let's go ahead and drag it up. We'll put it right center here is good. And we'll take sign out. We'll drag sign out right about here. That's fine. And we'll add constraints for it. I'll control drag from my update profile. I'll center it vertically with my image. So center vertically. I'll click on my constraints button and I'll say I want it to be 20 to the lead-in and I'll add one constraint. So at that point, our button is done. Our update profile button is done. We'll do the same for sign out. I click on sign out. I control drag onto the pencil logo here, the button, center vertically. I click on my add constraints and I say 20 to the trailing. And like that, we are done.
So how do you know to do that? Is that from like experience, just messing around with it, or like?
What, when you say what?
Constraints. How do you know the easy way to just do it?
Well, based on the UI we have here, that's like the more logical way. But it's up to us what we want to design, right? There's no, right? It's the designer, and then in our case, we don't have a designer, but that's what we think looks good. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Cool. And centering it vertically here makes sense because you need to make it visually appealing, right? So that makes more sense to center it vertically here, same as the sign out button. Cool? Awesome. So next up, let's go ahead and get a segmented control. Segmented control here. Drag a segmented control over, center it. And we could drag it here. We could drag it here such that it's aligned with the email and with the text field. And the first one, we'll just call it My Items. And the second one, we'll call it Favorites. And now we'll go ahead and set up the constraints for that. So we'll click on constraints. We'll say 8 to the bottom, 8 to the bottom of the email label. We'll make it 20 to the lead-in and 20 to the trailing, and we'll make the height 44. So 4 constraints. We have top constraint to the bottom of the email, which is like 8 points or 20 points. 8 points is fine. 20 points to the lead-in, 20 points to the trailing, and the height of it, we said is 44 points. With that, we're going to add 4 constraints.
You said the height is 44.
Yeah. Great. Next, let's go ahead and get a table view. So UI, table view, drag table view, and drag table view, and let's go ahead and align this, set the constraints for it. So we'll say 0 everywhere, or standard, and we'll add 4 constraints. So my table view is snap to the top, to the lead-in, to the trailing, and to the bottom. Great. So with that, we could run our app and just test out, is our UI looking like what we just set up? Any questions? Everybody set up the constraints? Yes? Yes?
Yes.
Wow, when I do remote, that's going to be hard there. It's like we have us here, and we don't have that feedback. Okay, so let's run the app. So click on our profile, and it is what we set up here. We have a table view which doesn't have any data yet. That's fine. We're able to click on our segmented control. Great. Right? So that's our UI. Cool. Next up, let's go ahead and set up our table view, set up our data source and all that stuff. So with that, let's go to Assistant Editor. Assistant Editor, make sure we have our profile view controller opened. So option click on profile view. And make sure we have profile view controller next to our canvas area. Okay, so let us go ahead and control drag some elements. We'll control drag, well, we don't need the segmented control. We'll control drag the table view as an outlet, and the segmented control will be an action. So table view. And next we'll have our segmented control. Segmented control right below our sign out button pressed here. Segmented control. Click on it and control drag over. We'll change the type to UI segmented control, and we'll just call it segmented control. Segmented control pressed. Segmented control pressed. Great. So we have 2 states in that particular table view. We have one state where I want to see my items. We have a next state where I want to see my favorites. Cool? We have 2 states. When we talk about states, what comes to mind? Enumeration. Very good. So we'll go ahead to the top of our class here. We'll create an enum. We'll call it view state here. View state. View state will have 2 cases. One case is going to be my items. The next case will be favorites. Okay. We'll start off with a default state, private var view state of type view state. Here we are annotating, so we could just do dot my items. Because if I do not annotate, I can do dot my items, right? I'll get a compiler error. So here I need to use type annotation in order for me to say, hey, dot items. Or we could just say view state dot items, which is fine. So we have a state my items, which makes sense because when we run our application, my items is the first segmented control. Our state changes when the user clicks on the segmented control, right? So when the user clicks on that segmented control, our state changes. So let's go ahead in our segmented control button pressed. Let's write some logic there to change the state. Okay. I was going to use the ternary operator, but I want to keep this simple for us here. Right? So if view state equal to, say, my items, else we just toggle in the state here. So toggle current view state. So if view state equal to my items, what do I want to do here? Mr. One? So if the user clicked on my items here, right? Actually, we could write a different logic here. This is not good enough here. So we could change this up. Let's just change this up. So toggle the state, and we have sender. Let's switch on it. So switch on sender. Yeah, we'll just switch on the sender selected index, and we'll say case 0, view state equal to, can I just do that here? Oh, awesome. And case 1, we'll say view state equal to favorites. Okay, what does sender is? Well, sender's default, sorry. Default, just break. Sender is my segmented control. My segmented control has indices. That's how it works. What's the default index? The default index is 0. Everybody with me? Everybody with me, right? Here we have two segments. We have 0 and 1. That's why we switched on it. If I click on favorites, I want to change my view state to favorites, okay? We'll have a did set on our view state to change whatever we want to change, right? So what the user does, the user is basically changing the state of our application by using that segmented control there. Okay, toggle current view state value. Any questions about this block of code? This just works better here in that particular case. I don't want to do ternary operator for now. I just wanted to keep it simple here. But right, we know ternary operator, we could switch on things or toggle things, whatever we have to do there. Okay, so here we're simply changing the view state. So if I click on 0 in that case, which is my items, I update it to my items. If I click on favorites, I update it to favorites. And at that point, we need to have a did set on our view state to do something. So on our view state, let's go up. On our view state here, every time view state changes, what do we want to do? On our did set, reload, very good. So here we'll just simply reload the table view. So table view dot reload. We simply reload the table view. When we reload the table view, we'll have some logic in our data source method and in our data source methods, we'll have some logic like, hey, what's your state? Based on your state, you return X or Y, whatever that is. That'll be the count. So if you're on favorites, return favorites.count. If you're on my items, return my items.count. That's where we headed. We have our table view. We haven't done Tableview Datasource here. Let's go ahead and do it. So tableview.datasource equal to self. And we need some data too, right? We need data. So here we have favorites data, and we have my items data. So here we could say private var favorites is an array of favorites, which we do not have yet. We have a did set on it. So we need to comment that out because that doesn't exist. We don't have. Actually, we could just do string here for now. And next we have our items, so private var, we'll just call it my items, is an array of items. Have a did set on this. Okay, cool. So now we need to continue on. We need to implement, or we need to conform to our data source protocols. Let's go ahead and do so. So in data source at the bottom, let's go to the very bottom. We get into that 300 mark. Well, not yet, but we don't want to pass that 300 line mark. There's like a rule of thumb. If you get your view controller is like 300 lines, you need to start refactoring things, right? So extension here on our profile view controller. UI table view data source. We say number of items, number of rows. And here we'll say if view state equal to my items, return X, else return Y. So if view state equals to my items, we return my items.count, else return favorites.count. And then we go down to our cell for row. In our cell for row, we'll say guard let, we'll use our item cell, well, just cell, equal to tableview.dequeue our item cell index path, and here we typecast in it to item cell.
Did we give our table view item cell already?
We have a nib, so we need to register.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so fatal error here, could not downcast to item cell, build. So here we have an item cell. We'll just simply return
And you should use the
cell.
name that you gave your item cell, just in case it wasn't called item cell. Like mine
You
was
mean
called-
here?
Yeah, mine was called, no, for the release identifier. I gave mine item cell, so that way you get crashed.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, it needs to be the same. Yeah, and if you've been here, right? So it should be the same. So here, let's get an item. Well, if view state equal to my items, else. So we need to do a configure here. So if it's view state items, we'll simply say cell.configure, and we'll pass in configure, configure cell item, and here we'll get an item. Item is items, well, my items, index path, row, build, and we need to do some work here to get a favorite. We need to have our favorite model, which we don't have yet, but that's fine. We'll say favorites, index path dot row, and we'll have like a cell dot configure cell for favorite, something like that. Coming up, build. Cool. For now, we go ahead. Question. One array is, yeah, we'll go up right here. We'll finish type and then we'll go up. One array is favorites. We need a model called favorites. We don't have it yet. So we just made an array of strings. And the other one, we call it my items. It's an array of items. Those are the two arrays we have. But we'll scroll up the minute we're done typing. We'll scroll up again to take a look at it. And we have a did set on both of them. They'll just reload the table view when they're set. But before we do favorites, we'll just test out my items first, and then we'll come back to favorites. Anybody still type in the protocol methods there?
Should we register?
Yes, we need to register the nib or we'll crash. Very good. Very, very good. Because here we have an item cell, but item cell is a nib. That's why we have no cell here, right? If we take a look at our storyboard, there's no cell because we'll be using a nib. Yes, we'll be using the same for both. I won't create the favorites model right now. My objective for now is for us to populate the my items, and then we'll go back and we'll do the favorites model. Cool? Luba? Okay. Anybody still typing the protocol methods? Okay, so Amini, you wanted to see the arrays you said earlier? So what do we have here? We have favorites and we have my items. And both are basically reloading the table view. Are we coming from a background thread? Yes, we are. So just do dispatch here while we're here. And simply self table view, reload. And again, to do here, we haven't done it. To do create favorite model. Do we want to have a listener in this? We'll do get items on that. So let's go right to get. Okay, cool. Let's go to our database service class. Are we all okay here?
Yeah.
Let's go to our database service class. In our database service class, right below our is items in favorites function, let's write a function called get get user items or fetch user items. Let's do fetch user items. Was there a question? Mr. One, how you doing?
What's the point of this function?
To return to filter by a user. Right? So I want to get a particular user's items, right?
You have to do this through Firebase.
Yes. Because right now, where are we? We're in the profile view controller, for example. And that function will be used for multiple things, right? For our particular reason, we'll be filtering based on the current user that's logged in. But we're not going to only tie it to that current user. What if I want to see a different user's items? I want to see that user's items as well. So the only thing we'll be passing to that function is the ID of the user, and go ahead and filter and just return me that particular user's items. Cool? Awesome. So here we'll pass in user ID, which is a string. And we have some sort of completion here. Escape in here. And we have our result type. What does our result type expect? What should it look like? An array of items. Very good. So that's a success. And we have error, build. Okay, cool. So let's guard. Actually, do we need to guard? No, we have a user ID already. So simply database or db.collection. What collection are we after here? Users. Very good. Wait, no, we're after items. We're after items. Very good. We could have had users have a sub-collection of items, right? But right now we have an items collection. So we're going to go after the items collection and filter the items collection based on that user ID. So here, database service dot items collection. Item selection, we're gonna do a query again. We saw query earlier, right? Yes, everybody? We saw query on line 172. So be careful there. This is gonna be useful for our assessment there. So we've seen it twice, right? So here we queried for the item ID when we were doing is item in favorites. Everybody with me? And we're doing it again. So we're seeing query twice here. So we're gonna say where here is equal to, and here I'm passing user ID. And the where is going to be, the where field is that property I'm looking for. And the property I'm looking for here is cell ID. Let me double check this.
Does it matter if you put path or field?
Put field, because path looks for a path. Field is a property. So let me just double check and make sure the names is correct here.
It's the third one, right?
The part where you wrote the string seller ID, right? That should match our string.
Yes, that should match the key exactly. On Firebase. That's what I'm verifying right now, what we sent up. And what we sent up is seller ID. So we're good.
That string on Firebase is the same thing from when we do create item.
Yes, exactly. They're all the same. So ideally, if you have a constants file somewhere, that would be better programming to have a constants file instead of saying hard code seller ID, right? Because before you know it, I'm putting an extra space here. And I'm like, oh my God, it's not working. So be careful there. Like,
So that would have been, I think, either.
and I'll do a constants file and just have cell ID mapped to like a static let. And I'll just say constant dot cell ID.
Oh, you just call it constant.
Yep, the file, I'll call it constants.swift.
And the static would be the string narrative.
Exactly. So it would be something like this. Let me just take a quick, where would I dump this? Models. Let's just put it in models for now. So in models, you could, for example, create a new file. It's going to be like a Swift file, which is fine. And then I would call it constants. Right? Constants like that. And here, it would just be some sort of struct called constants. And here I'll just say static let seller ID equal to seller ID.
That also be a good place in collection name.
Yeah, you could do that as well. Yeah. And you could have like substructs and constants.database dot, but it's up to us, right? But here I have it one place throughout my code. Cool? So this would be like a best practice approach as to like not hard coding it everywhere, which we do with our database collections, right? But just be careful there. So always resolve to like having a constants or somewhere you're not hard coding this everywhere in your code. Because we've seen it many times where we think we have ID like this, it doesn't work, we don't get a proper error, right? And we're like, oh my God, what's going on? So resort to constants here. Cool. So going back to, where are we? Database service, right? That's where we were. So here, the way I would use it, I would simply say constants build, constants, dot seller ID, seller ID, like that. Cool? That's how I'd use it. And now there's no error here because it's one place. Cool? So now we say cell ID equal to user ID, and user ID is what the user ID is here. And now we just want to do get documents. So get documents, snapshot, error. Say that again. Yes, yes. And then, but at the end of the day, what we're getting an array of items, right? But yes, we have to map it. Yes. Same process. Every time we have a snapshot, we have to map it to some model we have.
So what is the term snapshot?
Snapshot is the terminology that Firebase uses to represent the current state of the data, right? You have a question?
Seller ID and user ID is the same.
On our particular item, we don't have a user ID, but user ID and seller ID is the same, yes. Because whoever posted that particular item, we call it seller ID. We don't say user ID. That would be a bit, right, ambiguous there, like what's user ID, what does that mean? But it's the seller ID. But now we want to get all the users' items, right, Luba? We want to get all the users' items. The only way to filter it is using the user ID because that's what we use to populate the item with. Cool? Very good. So at this point, we have a snapshot here. So we'll say if let error equal to error here. And we'll say else if let snapshot equal to snapshot. And completion takes error. Good. So completion here, error. Else we have our snapshot. We are good to go here. We could just say items equal to, walk me through, who wants to walk me through this? What am I doing here? I want to get an array of items using the snapshot.
Snapshot.
Somebody else? Somebody else? May, walk me through this.
Snapshot dot
Yeah.
dot
Filter.
Is it that?
What does filter do again? it filters by some predicate, right? But here we're not trying to filter. We're trying to go through each array to create something. So what higher order function are we using here? Map, right? So map would transform some array, right? Cool, thank you. So now we're going through each document. Each document has a data property on it, right? Document.data. So we pass in our initializer here. We're trying to create an item. Our item has an initializer, which takes in a dictionary. The dictionary that we'll be getting is from document.data. The way we represent document.data is $0, $0.data. This is a dictionary. Okay? At that point, I have created an item. It returns, and at the end of the day, we'll have an array of items. And we have completion, success, and we return items array. We return items array. Awesome.
So dot data is all of the data within the item.
Yes, all the properties within that document. Right? So when we say dot data, this is the dot data here. Give me the whole dictionary. Everybody? The dot data represents all the fields for that document. We have one document here, all the fields. Give me all the fields. That's why we have to use that initializer on our dictionary, right? To create that item using the properties, using the key value pairs. This is why we use that. So we look at our item initializer again. We getting back, this is the dot data here. Everybody? This is the dot data. And I'm going through each dictionary key value. I'm creating properties from them. Okay? Cool. So we have our fetch user items. Great, great, great. Let's go ahead and implement it. Can we move over to the profile view? All right, so back in our profile view, let's go ahead and right here, we'll write private function fetch items database service dot fetch user items. We need a user ID here. How do we get a user ID? How do we get a user ID? Marjette, how do we get a user ID? We need the current user ID. How do we get a user ID here? What's that? Let's look through our code and see how we could get it. I'm waiting, no problem. So we need to get a user ID here. You're working on your assessment. You want to get a user ID. How do we get it? The current user, right? We need the current user's ID. The person who's logged in currently. How do we get the user ID? Yes, very good. It's guard let user equal to auth dot current user else return. Right? So this is the current user. It's probably nil. But if the user is in our application, it's not nil here, but we still have to guard against it in order to get the user object as non-optional. And now we could say user.uid. Cool, awesome. And next, we will now switch on our result. Case failure, let error. Break here, case success, let items. And here I could simply say self.myItems, weak self here, my items equal to items. And if we have an error, we'll simply say dispatch queue.main.async, and we'll say self show alert. We'll say fetching error.localized. Cool. And again, this function becomes handy because now in our UI, we'll get to tomorrow at some point. If I click on my user name on my first view, like in the items feed, if I click on the username, I want to segue and just show that particular user's items. Everybody with me? So at that point, I'll have that person's ID, which is why we created the users collection, and I'll be able to navigate to that particular user. Cool? So that becomes handy, not just for here, but anywhere we want to get a particular user's items. So fetch items, we have fetch items, we have viewDidLoad here. We'll just simply call fetch items here, build. So fetch items sets up our my items. My items has a did set on it that reloads our table view. And we'll have items. Okay. So let's go ahead and run this. Update UI. Go to profile view, and we are crashing because we'll get to that point here at some point. Mr. Brendan, why did we crash here? Did you just crash as well or no?
Yes.
Why did we crash?
We
Did not register a cell. How do we register that cell?
need to get some viewDidLoad.
So in the viewDidLoad, I'll walk back to viewDidLoad here. So viewDidLoad, what am I doing in viewDidLoad? Tableview.register. Which initializer are we using? Nib, very good, sir. And here we say in UI nib, right? We give it a name. What name is it? Item cell, very good. Bundle nil. And what's the identifier? Item cell. Awesome. So here we need to make sure we register a cell because this is the exact error we got here. Because we're using a nib, we have to go ahead and register a nib. So now, thank you, Brendan. So now we'll run the app again and click on our profile view, and whoa, we got some big cells here. That's fine.
I don't even have that.
The what?
I don't have that.
You don't have what?
For my items.
So Luba says we need to change the height, right, Luba? So let's go ahead and change the height. So back in our profile view controller, at the very bottom, let's do extension here. Profile view controller, UI table view delegate. What are we implementing, Luba? Height for row. Awesome. And here we could just return, what did we use earlier? Like 140, I think, right? In our previous cell. So we could simply just return 140 here, but this is not enough. What else am I missing? Is this gonna get called currently? We need to set the delegate, right? So back in our viewDidLoad, we need to make sure we say tableview.delegate equals self. The what? Yeah, we made it 140. So height for row, we implemented height for row, and we returned 140. And now let's run it again. So we'll stop here and we'll continue tomorrow, right? We don't have much to we'll be good. So if I click on the profile, I have my items here. Do we see our items showing up? Only our items, right? Because obviously there's other items as well in the collection, but I'm only seeing items for Bunny. Because Bunny is logged in. Let's test this. Let's sign out. Who's the other user here? Shin. When I show my self for row at. Self for row. We have some to-dos here. We're not done with the favorites, model, and all that stuff. We'll do that tomorrow. And then we'll have our favorites showing up. Any question in particular?
No, I saw one.
Okay, cool. Very good. Register, view did load. View did load. Those are view did load here. So register, what are we doing? We say register item cell and make sure that your names are the same and then you're good. So back here, what were we saying? Oh, I was trying to log out. So let's log out. I have Bunny and I have Shin. So I'm seeing Bunny stuff, which makes sense. Sign out. Let me log in with Shin here. Is it Shin? Who knows? 1, 2. User authentication. Oh, I don't think that's Shin. I think that is Mac. Let's try Mac here. Mac at mac.com. Log in. Mac doesn't have anything for Mac. Sign out. Let's see if Mr. Alex has stuff. Log in. Mr. Alex has Shin. Okay, so Mr. Alex looks like his Shin here. Cool. So we're able to test that. Tomorrow when we come, we'll test out our favorites. So that's populated. Things we have to do, we have to create a model of favorites and query favorites, very similar to how we queried fetch items here. And lastly, tomorrow what we'll also do, when I click on, for example, a username, like if I click on Shin here, it's going to segue and show me only Shin's documents or whatever it is, or Bunny. I don't have to sign in and sign out. Everybody with me? Right? So that's going to conclude our demo with what we do tomorrow. Any questions with what we did today? Scroll to the success part. Oh, sorry, in the code here? Which ones? Fetch items? All right, cool. Any other questions? We covered a lot today. We did querying. We did querying twice today, right? What does querying do? Querying basically filters on some logic that you're looking for. Yes, sir?
We should add a listener to it, right?
We could add a listener, but I don't want to add a listener. I want to have a refresh control on that one.
Oh, okay.
Right? I don't want to have a listener on that one. I could have a listener, but I rather, because I want to show us both ways, I want to do, actually, let's do the refresh control now so we have it for tomorrow. And then we'll do the, yes, go ahead. Which one? Oh, the items in general. Antonio, sir, can you take a look at the Minis machine?
Yes.
So Howard, you could do either or, but ours, I want to model it such that we remember how to do refresh control, right? Are we good for like 5 more minutes? All right, let's add a refresh control and we'll end here. Because right now there's no way to go here, like say I create a new item, it's not gonna automatically update, right? So we'll add like a refresh control, so when I pull, it refreshes. Question?
Yeah, it doesn't update
Right, so right now we'll just add, Howard was saying we could add a listener, which is true. The listener will just automatically update. But here I want to show us all aspects of what we've seen so far. So we could add a refresh control or we could add a listener. Well, we're not going to add a listener, but listener would be very similar. It would be very similar to what we did for our item feed controller. Our item feed controller has a listener.
Where? It's inside the view controller?
Look at your code real quickly. It's in the view did appear. Yes,
the
exactly.
control.
Yep. All right. Are we good for 5 more minutes? All right. So let's go ahead and add a refresh control here. Where am I? Profile view controller.
Item feed.
No. We're in the profile view controller right now.
No, but we did it before.
Yeah. I want us to make sure we have references to everything we've done so far so that we're not like, oh, I don't know X.
So, Alex, so in item feed controller, in you did appear listeners for that.
Yes. So every time we change the
Refresh
database,
right
yeah, it refreshes right away. But now we're going to add manual refresh with get documents. Can we continue? Any other questions about refresh control versus listener versus get documents? Cool. All right, so private. Here, let us go ahead and add a refresh control of type UI, refresh control, right above view did load in profile view controller. Tiffany, any questions? Tiffany? Because two of you guys right now not there, right? Like, what's the question there? What's the question there? We're almost done lecture, so I could come and take a look at it. But let's just pay attention, and then we'll continue. Cool? All right. Tiff, let's just do the refresh control. We'll come back to what your error is there. Refresh control. Let's go ahead and set that up. Again, we could refactor this view did load to be shorter. But for now, we'll just say refresh control equal to UI refresh control. Again, scroll views have a refresh control here. In that case, we have a table view, which has a refresh control property. On that table view refresh control property, we set our refresh control like that. Great. Our refresh control needs some sort of function to call. In that case, we'll do fetch items, which makes sense here. So we'll say table view, not table view, sorry. We'll say refresh control dot add target.
Is it an exclamation point or a question mark?
Exclamation. Self. And the target or the action we're looking for here needs to be Objective-C, so we need to update our fetch items. And the event is value changed. Value change is when that refresh gets pulled. And now we just need to update our fetch items to say add Objective-C here. Build. What else we need to do for our refresh control? We're missing one thing there. What else we need to do? We need to stop it. Very good. So we need to stop it. It automatically starts, but it doesn't automatically stop. I mean, that would be great, but it doesn't. So we need to stop it somewhere or end it somewhere. Places we could end it, let's see. We pulled it here. It starts to refresh. In that return here, we also need to stop it here. Well, the odds of we getting here is very slim, but still doesn't really matter. So we'll say refresh control dot end refreshing. Yeah, because the minute we pull it down, it looks at fetch items, it starts to refresh. But if there was some reason like there's no current user, which is 99.9% of a chance of not happening here, we would stop it. Next, we have our failure clause. We could do it outside here. We could simply do dispatch queue.main.async, and we could stop it here. We say self ? Dot. Cool.
And that is what, that's still inside of
I'm inside of fetch
the
items.
database, okay, but,
Okay, inside of the
Okay, cool. Let's spin it out. And we are gonna be good. So go to profile view, we could test it out, pull it, make sure it stops. If it doesn't stop, we haven't stopped it somewhere. But let's go ahead and test it. Let's create a new item. What items do I currently have? Let's create a new item. Do I have a car here? Maybe I do, I don't. Car, oh, I got toys. Oh, I got a bike. Oh, I got stuff. This is $12,000. Trek TT bike. And it's limited. That's fine. So new item, sell that. Somebody please remind me to fix that too. Go here, I have a bike that I just listed. We need to sort this by date. We could do that. And go to profile, and if I refresh here, I have my bike. So I'll pull to refresh works. This is not being sorted by date, that's why we see the bike being last here. But if we sort by date, the bike would be first based on most recent. If we sort by most recent there. Cool? Awesome. Did everybody refresh control work? Again, we could do refresh control, or we could do, as Howard was saying here, we could do have a snapshot listener to automatically update. I'm sorry?
Listener is better. But you
It
don't
depends
have
on
to
the
do
use
that.
case that you're looking for.
Would they be put in the delegate?
In the delegate. In the delegate. What do we put? The height. Height for row. Height for row. Okay. So now we've seen get documents, which is getting documents once. We've seen listener, which always listens for changes and modifies it, right? So we have all the tools we need to work with whichever UI we want to work with, okay? With Instagram, we have to pull to refresh. It doesn't automatically update. There's reasons for that. If it's always trying to update, resources, right? Resources is big. Let the user control if they want to see new updates or not. Everybody with me? Cool? If you have a stock app working on, that better be real time. I'm not pulling to refresh to see what the stock market is now. That should always be listening, okay? So it's up to you and the use case that you're going for. Cool? All right, so we'll stop here. Question? All right, so we'll stop here and we'll continue tomorrow or wrap up tomorrow.